When people think of South Korea, most immediately picture K-pop, Samsung, and the brightly lit streets of Seoul that never seem to sleep. This is a country that rose from the ashes of war to become one of the world's strongest economies in just a few decades, a success story admired across the planet. But what if there is a price behind that miracle that very few outsiders ever see? What if behind the skyscrapers are slums that still exist in the heart of the city? What if behind the billion-dollar entertainment industry lies a mental health crisis spreading quietly through society? Today, we are stepping into a very different South Korea, a South Korea that exists behind the spotlight. Part 1. The Families That Rule. In 2014, an international flight in New York was preparing for takeoff. But because a bag of macadamia nuts was served the wrong way, the aircraft turned back to the gate. A chief flight attendant was removed from the flight in front of hundreds of passengers. The person responsible was the daughter of Korean Air's chairman. To many foreigners, the story sounded like a bizarre scandal, but to South Koreans, it reflected a much larger problem. They call it gapjil. It is the practice of powerful people using their status to dominate those beneath them. To understand this, we need to talk about the chaebols. These are massive family-owned conglomerates, such as Samsung, Hyundai, LG, and Lotte. Names that influence not only products, but jobs, education, and the future of millions of people. Samsung alone generates economic value equal to nearly a quarter of a South Korea's economy. Just think about that for a moment. One company has become so influential that it almost resembles a country within a country. When a small number of families control a large portion of the economy, power no longer exists, only inside government offices. It appears in career choices, university exams, and the dreams of an entire generation. But if power is concentrated at the top of the pyramid, what is happening at the bottom? The answer lies underground. Part 2. The City Beneath the City. If you have watched the movie Parasite, you probably remember the semi-basement apartment where the main family lived, a place where sunlight rarely entered and the air always felt damp. Many people assumed it was simply an exaggerated cinematic detail designed to create drama, but the reality is far more disturbing. Hundreds of thousands of people in Seoul still live in semi-basement apartments like those today. Small rooms buried below street level, suffocating during the summer, potential death traps during the rainy season. In 2022, the heaviest rainfall in more than a century hit Seoul. Floodwaters poured into low-lying neighborhoods. Inside one semi-basement apartment, a family of 3 became trapped. The pressure of the water was so powerful that they could not force the door open. They drowned inside their own home. The tragedy shocked the entire country, but that was only the tip of the iceberg, because right next to the luxury district of Gangnam, home to multi-million-dollar apartments and some of the most expensive brands in South Korea, there was still a shantytown known as Guryong Village, homes built from scrap wood, plastic sheets, and rusted metal. A completely different world located just minutes away from extreme wealth. It is one of the greatest contradictions of modern South Korea, a nation that became rich at breathtaking speed, yet not everyone was brought along for the journey. And for the young people fortunate enough to live above ground, the next battle takes place on their own faces. Part 3. A Face for Survival. South Korea is often called the cosmetic surgery capital of the world. But this is not simply a story about beauty. It is a story about competition. In many countries, a job application requires education and experience. In South Korea, your appearance can also become part of your resume. Looks are no longer just a personal matter. They have become a social advantage, an advantage that can influence job opportunities, dating prospects, and sometimes even a person's future. Many families view cosmetic surgery as a graduation gift, not because they want their children to become famous, but because they fear their children will fall behind in the race. Think about what that means. You have just entered adulthood, and the first message society gives you is not to develop new skills or gain more experience. It is to change your face. When pressure from appearance, education, and work all crash down on the same generation, the consequences eventually emerge in a place nobody can see, inside the human mind. Part 4. A nation on the edge. There is one number that deeply concerns many experts. South Korea has one of the most severe mental health crises in the developed world. Every year, thousands of people choose to end their own lives. Even more alarming, this is not a problem limited to the elderly or the poor. It appears across nearly every age group, from students and university graduates to people at the peak of their careers. What pushed one of the wealthiest countries on earth into this situation? The answer begins long before many children reach adulthood. Every year, on one special day, in November, the entire country of South Korea seems to change its rhythm. Airplanes temporarily stop taking off. Many workplaces adjust their schedules. Police officers are deployed across the streets, but they are not chasing criminals. They are helping students get to their exams. It is the day of the Suneung examination. The test is widely considered one of the most stressful exams on the planet. For many Korean families, 8 hours of testing can determine the rest of a person's life, which university you attend, whether you have a chance to join a major corporation, how much money you will earn, even your future social status. The pressure is so intense that Koreans once shared a chilling saying, "Sleep 4 hours and you pass. Sleep 5 hours and you fail." This is no longer just education. It is a fight for survival. But the frightening reality is that the exam is only the starting line. Once people enter society, an even harsher race is waiting for them. Part 5. Working until exhaustion. Many people assume life becomes easier after graduation. But for many South Koreans, the pressure simply moves from the classroom to the workplace. South Korea ranks among the developed world's highest working hour nations. Yet even those statistics fail to tell the full story, because after official working hours end, many employees are still expected to attend company dinners and drinking gatherings. Koreans call this hosik. In theory, it is a social activity. In reality, many workers see it as an obligation. They cannot refuse. If the boss has not left yet, you are not supposed to leave either. An ordinary evening can continue until midnight, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning. Then everything starts again, the next day. For decades, this culture was viewed as part of the country's rapid rise. Work harder, sacrifice more, give more. That was the formula that helped transform South Korea into an economic powerhouse. But the cost has become increasingly visible. Stress, burnout, depression, and an entire generation has begun asking whether success is truly worth the sacrifice. Yet even after working themselves to exhaustion, there is still one dream that remains out of reach for many young people: a home. Part 6. The collapse of the housing dream. If you ask young South Koreans what worries them most, many will not mention war. They will not mention unemployment. They will mention housing prices. More than half of South Korea's population is concentrated around the Seoul metropolitan area. People continue to move there for jobs, education, and opportunity. But when millions of people rush toward the same destination, property prices begin to soar and eventually rise far beyond what ordinary people can afford. For many young Koreans, buying a home in Seoul now feels like an impossible dream, not a goal that requires a few years of saving, but something that may take an entire lifetime. Even renting is far from easy. South Korea's famous jaunt system requires tenants to provide an enormous security deposit, sometimes equal to an entire family's life savings. If everything goes smoothly, that money is returned at the end of the contract. But if a dishonest landlord is involved, years of savings can disappear overnight. As a result, many young adults continue living with their parents, not for a few years, but well into their 30s, sometimes even longer. Marriage gets delayed, having children gets delayed. And then, a phenomenon unlike anything seen before begins to emerge, a country slowly losing its own children. Part 7. A country that no longer wants children. There is one number that has shocked the world. South Korea now has the lowest birth rate on the planet. For a country to maintain a stable population, the average woman needs to have about 2 children. In South Korea, that number is not even half of that. This means each new generation is significantly smaller than the one before it. The population is no longer growing, it is shrinking. The government has tried almost everything: cash incentives, housing assistance, birth bonuses, yet the results have remained limited, because the problem was never just about money. Young people see housing prices rising higher every year, work pressure becoming more intense, the cost of raising children becoming increasingly expensive, and they begin asking a simple question. If they are already struggling just to survive, how can they afford to raise a child? That is when something unusual begins to happen. A country with too few children starts creating places that no longer want children at all. Part 8. No kids allowed. If you walk through certain parts of South Korea, you may come across signs that spark controversy. No kids zone, no children, not allowed. These signs can be found in cafes, restaurants, libraries, and various other businesses. The reason often given is to reduce noise or minimize legal risks. But for many people, they represent something much larger, a society gradually losing patience with children. It sounds like a contradiction, a country with fewer children than ever before. Yet at the same time, more and more places are choosing not to welcome them. It becomes a vicious cycle. The fewer children there are, the less people become accustomed to being around children, and the fewer people want children themselves. But behind the population crisis lies another conflict, quieter, more sensitive, and growing deeper every year. Part 9. The gender divide. For many years, South Korea was one of the societies most heavily influenced by traditional patriarchal values. But today's younger generation is changing rapidly. Many young women feel they are carrying too much pressure, working full-time, taking care of the household, raising children, and still being expected to meet strict beauty standards. Some have chosen to reject the traditional path entirely. The 4B movement emerged. No dating, no marriage, no children, no romantic relationships. Although it remains a relatively small movement, it reflects a much larger reality. The divide between young men and young women continues to widen. As confidence in marriage declines, the birth rate continues to fall. And while society debates its future, another industry continues selling the world a perfect image of South Korea. That industry is K-pop. Part 10. The dark side of K-pop. The world sees brightly lit stages, perfect performances, superstars with millions of devoted fans. But very few people see what happens behind the curtain. Many trainees begin their journey at a very young age. They spend years living in an intensely competitive environment: dance training, vocal training, weight control, image control, speech control. Many wait years before they are finally allowed to debut, and even after achieving fame, the pressure never disappears. One small mistake, one old photograph, one controversial comment. Sometimes that is enough to trigger nationwide criticism. In that world, perfection is not the goal, it is the requirement, and social media has made that pressure even more relentless. Part 11. The Internet Courtroom. South Korea has one of the fastest internet systems in the world. Almost everyone is connected online. But technology does not only bring benefits, it also amplifies humanity's darker instincts. A rumor, a short video clip, a controversial comment. Any of them can spread across the entire country within hours. A reputation can take years to build, yet collapse overnight in a society that places enormous value on personal image. Pressure from the internet can sometimes feel even harsher than pressure in the real world. Yet when it comes to the people who have suffered the most, perhaps no group has been forgotten more than the generation that built modern South Korea. Part 12. The Forgotten Generation. Today, South Korea is one of the world's largest economies, yet the paradox is that many elderly people continue to struggle. This is the generation that worked relentlessly when the country was still poor. They built the factories, built the roads, built the foundation of the economic miracle, but not everyone shared, equally in the rewards. Many entered old age with limited savings and minimal support. Some continue working at an age when they should already be resting. This is one of the least discussed consequences of rapid development. The people who created the miracle do not always get to fully enjoy it. But if we focus only on the difficulties, we miss half of the story, because South Korea is also one of the most remarkable success stories in modern history. Part 13. The Miracle on the Han River. In 1953, the war ended. At the time, South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. Its infrastructure was devastated. Its economy was nearly destroyed. Few people believed the country could ever become a major power, but the impossible happened. Within just a few decades, South Korea transformed itself into a global technology hub. Samsung, Hyundai, LG brands that once started small are now present across the world. Life expectancy ranks among the highest on earth. Healthcare is modern. Transportation is efficient. Crime rates remain low. The level of public safety is something many developed countries envy. That is why South Korea's story cannot be told entirely in black and white. Its reality has always contained both light and shadow. So is South Korea a bad country? No, that would be far too simple. An answer to a far more complicated story. What we have seen is not the failure of the Korean people. It is the price of developing faster than almost any nation in modern history. Work pressure, rising housing costs, declining birth rates, loneliness, mental health struggles. The most thought-provoking reality is that these challenges no longer belong only to South Korea. They are appearing in more and more developed countries around the world. Perhaps that is why South Korea is not a warning of failure. It is a reflection of a future that many other societies may be moving toward. And if there is one lesson this story leaves us with, it is this: to truly understand a country, you must be willing to see both sides of it. Not only the neon lights, but also the shadows behind them. Not only the miracle, but also the price of that miracle.